Hey everyone, Dan here from Frontend Adelaide. Much like everyone else, we've been running a bunch of our stuff virtually this year. Recently, we ran a set of lightning talks from great local speakers. Like a few, we recorded them. So coming up is Robin Garnham with Moving On Up, Career Progression. Enjoy!
I guess, what I kind of wanted to talk about was really around progression and trying to help people to figure out what exactly, I guess, a hiring manager might be looking for. I've been a key decision maker in probably more than 50 hires. I've grown pretty substantial engineering teams. And so, really, I guess this is sort of, what I've gleaned and what I think that most hiring managers are looking for. So trying to give some kind of insights. So my background is working for a long time at Optus. My last position there, I was a security architect. I was the director of engineering at Sign, and I worked at Alcidian about a decade ago. And I guess over the course of my career, I've worked a lot in web, moving into quite a bit of iOS stuff. I do quite a lot of stuff in security, but also I tinker around with some machine learning and computer vision stuff. These days, basically, I work as a freelance consultant, advising people on how to grow their product teams, solve technical challenges, but I probably spend more than 50% of my time building usually pretty complicated R&D type projects, heavily in the iOS space at the moment. So the talk is split into two parts. The first is really, I guess, progression. So what I see as progression is really how to elevate your standing within an existing team or organization. And then the second part is when you decide that maybe it's not for you anymore, what tips there might be in order to secure the next role that you're looking for. So I came up with the idea of our three heroes. So we've got someone who's, I guess, a bit more junior in the sort of the early stage of their career, someone who's kind of mid-level, and then somebody who's, I guess, beyond mid. I put in the years of experience so people can somewhat identify, but I guess one of the things I've learned is that years of experience really doesn't correlate to ability or aptitude. It's a very rough approximation, but for me, it's really about what behaviours they're demonstrating day to day. Actually, is what kind of determines what they really are. So, first on progression, which is really how to kind of level up in your role. So, for a junior, I think the things that are really important is day-to-day professionalism. So, rocking up on time, not coming in hungover. Taking appropriate meal breaks, all that kind of easy, obvious stuff that, pretty much everyone should know to do. That's kind of the key thing, right? If you're not doing that, it doesn't really matter what else you do. Someone will probably, not really want to give you a whole lot of opportunity if you're not doing the basics. I think I wrote here no complaining, but what I really mean, I think, is that someone comes to you with like, hey, can you get this done? Even if it's outside your role subtly, or, it doesn't feel like maybe the best way, just give it a go. When you're in that early phase of your career, your job is really, I guess, to learn and absorb and be an explorer, trying to kind of learn all of the different aspects there are to the role, understanding and growing your empathy with what other people's roles and responsibilities are. And to me, that's day to day, usually being inquisitive. So asking lots of relevant questions. And what I found was when people were really great juniors, they kind of ask you questions and then you talk a little bit about it and they come back, a couple of days later and they're like, oh yeah, I looked into that. And how did you solve this problem? And it's like the conversation has actually progressed. And to me, these are all signs of someone that's quite passionate about becoming better. And that's ultimately, I think, what drives your individual progress. If you're a junior, you really should be trying to find mentors, and don't find mentors that are so far away from your skill set that it's not really relevant. So I always kind of like to look at it that the juniors really should be trying to find mentors in the mid-level devs. Mid-level devs should be trying to find mentors in seniors and so on. And I guess one of the best ways that most people learn is, reading and listening to podcasts, stuff in the domain. Like there's so much stuff that happens, as we all know, in the dev industry, that if you're not, you fall behind pretty quickly. So then we move on to our mid-level. And I think what the key thing here is really they start looking for how they take on more responsibility. So it may be that they start, as supporting the overall development process, like Scrum Master, kind of, delving into different areas and not just staying within their boundaries. And one of the best pieces of advice I think that I give in this is if you've got at most teams, there's niches that are missing that the team could really benefit from. So what I always say is, try to find something that you're A, passionate about, but B, is missing within the team, and then look to try to fill that. So I've done that quite a number of times in my career where nobody really knew much about security. So I kind of felt it was kind of interesting, and I started teaching myself and reading lots of blogs about it. And I kind of became the security guy. But it was more or less just a case of following what was interesting to me, but also relevant to the team. So it was a value from both perspectives. And I guess, delivering learning lunches and presenting at meetups, mentoring junior devs, it's kind of that engagement with the team in more than just the code we produce. There's loads of great developers that produce loads of great code. But to me, I'm looking for people that are going beyond that. They're trying to consider how the process could be more effective or how you could onboard people more efficiently, what the tooling's like. To me, those people are infinitely more valuable because there's an amplification effect where what they do day to day makes it better for everybody. And then that brings us on to our seniors. And I think the critical thing is really, it's around mindset. So you want to have confidence that they're able to lead architecture and solution design discussions. They're able to decompose problems and look at, okay, we've got this particular set of features, here's how you could potentially divide it over multiple different releases. And they're thinking about the technical implementation, but also how to break it down so that it's able to be executed, and working really on that kind of peer level with the product owner to make sure that the team has clear direction and is able to execute on the product owner's vision. I kind of like the idea that everyone's always mentoring somebody at a slightly lower level and looking to be mentored by someone at a slightly higher level, and that way you sort of progress in your career. Again, finding missing niches and trying to become an expert. It's worked in my career. That, if you find the things that are missing in a team and you become those things, then you become very valuable very quickly. You don't really want to be the dime a dozen, the same as everybody else. And that unique proposition that you add is usually extremely valuable, and has sought in my career that it's given me a lot of progression because I did the extra 5% where nobody else was kind of thinking about it. The other thing is that as a senior, you're not really expected to know everything, but I think everyone thinks that you do need to. So it's more about knowing what your blind spots are. You can't be an expert in everything, but if you know what you're weak in, that's the first step to getting stronger. And then one of the things I bang on quite a bit about is kind of this idea of focusing on the right level of quality. And it's funny that it would come after a talk about testing, because when you're dealing with an R&D type of project where you may have 2 weeks to ship something that proves that it's a viable feature or whatever, sometimes the right level of quality is zero test. Sometimes it's not even in the same tech stack you normally build in, because you're trying to validate that it is a useful thing. So knowing what the right level of quality for what you're building is really important. And I think people often get into the trap of, especially when you've got an established product, or introducing another product, is that those products are at different stages in the life cycle, and the level of quality required for each is different. So if you're always holding yourself to the highest possible standards, it really impedes on your productivity. And you've got to kind of have that pessimistic mindset that this is probably going to go nowhere because it's an unvalidated idea. So I think that's probably one of the things I look for most in seniors, is the ability to discern how much quality and rigor, how much do you invest in build tooling versus actually building the solution itself. So there's always this balancing act, which is tricky to get right. So then if all of that stuff you've been doing well, you're probably going to be rising up in the ranks. But at a certain point, I think it's important for people to experience different workplaces and to always be finding people that they can learn from. If you get to the top of the pyramid, so to speak, in terms of technical aptitude, you're probably going to start stagnating. And that's where I think, you should really consider moving on. So, here's, I guess, the things that I think are impressive. So for a junior, what we're looking for really is, again, professionalism. So rocking up to the interview on time, you're appropriately dressed, you're matching, I guess, what they're expecting as best as possible. I find side projects quite impressive. I don't really look at them from a technical perspective per se, but I look at them that the person's willing to put in their own effort to improve in some way. But also that's, sometimes they're solving unique or interesting business problems. So it kind of gives you an insight as to, how they think about business problems. I think it's really important to show that you didn't stop learning at uni. Unfortunately, tech is a thing that if you stop learning for even a few years, you become irrelevant pretty quickly. So for me, I'm always looking to I guess, validate that the person hasn't reached that stagnation point where actually they don't want to put the effort into being better, tomorrow than they were today. And I think one of the key things that people can get wrong at this stage is around salary. That salary is an interesting thing. If you want a lot of salary, I think you're better off investing in jobs where you're going to grow a lot, where you're going to have lots of varied experience and you're going to learn a ton. And that to me is what propels you to get a big salary much earlier on in terms of your career. Whereas if you're always trying to achieve a maximum salary, to me, that usually means you're going to be working in government or corporates where your exposure to the entire life cycle is going to be reduced. Like if you look at, a company like Optus, most of the people that work there work in very, very siloed teams. Like there's a dedicated ops team that runs everything. So your piece of it becomes very, very small and you're part of a long pipeline. Whereas if you're working in a small company where you're doing everything from gathering requirements all the way through to deployment and running servers, you tend to grow a lot and grow your awareness of different parts. And you might find that actually there's a different part of that process that you're actually really passionate about and you really enjoy. But the minimum you'll get is that you'll just have empathy for people that do it day in, day out, and you'll know how to talk their language and get results. And I think that's kind of a bit of a key gotcha for a lot of people that, especially early on in their career, they might be coming out of uni where they haven't earned any money, and so it's very appealing. But I think it's really critical to invest in themselves as a starting point. I look for people that are coachable. So, you'd be surprised how many people come in and kind of assume that they know better than, some of the people that have got, 10, 15 years of experience. I'm looking for always people that, if I tell them something, that they'll take it on board and they'll think about it and they'll determine if it's right for them and ask them good questions about that. But generally, I'm looking for really attitude over their aptitude, because skills can be taught, but you're not going to learn anything unless you actually want to. And so for me, it's always looking for, the right attitude is going to carry them much further than anything. Then our next is the mid. So I consider that when you first join and you're kind of a grad or you're a junior, you're still getting a hang of how the tools and languages work. But for me, as a mid-level, you really have to have the fundamentals. Like if you should know, inside and out pretty much the language that you're using and have a really strong command of, the basic tools. I think, that to be honest, there shouldn't be an enormous gap between a mid and a senior in terms of language knowledge. I wouldn't expect there to be a huge difference in terms of language knowledge going from a mid to a senior. I think by mid, you probably have a reasonable command of, how the language works. What I am also looking for in an interviewing process for a mid is really just their ability to integrate with the team. As a junior, you kind of come in and you're a little bit more moldable, but once you're kind of at that mid-level, you've probably settled into certain ways of working and you've learned a whole bunch of ways that are, I guess, quite hard to unlearn. So I'm looking always at, how they're going to integrate with the team. For me, it's actually, if they kind of demonstrate some kind of humbleness, I think that's really critical. Looking at, how do they respond to challenges? Do they think that they know everything? Because I think as soon as you start assuming that you know everything, your learning is really going to drop off. And I guess that's what I'm always looking for is people that are, they know where they're strong and where they're weak, and they're always trying to grow in new different ways. And I think, they should be trying to seek out really good seniors that they can learn from. There's certainly places out there where maybe the senior developers aren't particularly good or capable, and they have that position. For me, it's counterproductive to sit in a role where the people above you, in terms of seniority, aren't really adding any value. You're probably better off trying to find somewhere else rather than staying in that environment. But also, I guess by the mid-stage, I want them to know what good software development looks like. It may not be that their workplace facilitated it, but they should have an awareness of test-driven design, test-driven development. They should understand, the value that, consistent build pipelines add, and some of those kind of, I guess, basics from a technical perspective, but also they understand, good software development hygiene practices in Jira and Confluence and that kind of thing. I guess I'm looking that someone has put the effort into then that they understand what good actually looks like. And then moving on to the senior level, I'm looking for them to be sharing whatever their bonus value is. So I think everyone by this stage has some kind of projects or dimension that they've invested in that means that, aside from everyone else you'll interview, there'll be one person that has a unique aspect that might just fit your project perfectly. It might be that they have unique expertise that you don't find often. So I'm always looking to, and I would advocate, always be sharing your edge value and the things that you're passionate about. It's surprising how many times I've interviewed people where I've kind of asked them side questions, and what comes out is that, it's like, I'm really actually into compiler optimization. I'm like, that's totally what we require at the moment. We didn't have a job spec for it yet, but actually you're perfect for it. So I think it's always worthwhile sharing kind of bonus value that might not be what they're exactly looking for, but you can potentially fill. And I guess also how they're, you want to get a sense for, if I hire you, how are you going to make an immediate impact? What team would you kind of fit in? How would you be leading? And, they need to have some level of business acumen and awareness of how to, make trade-offs around, time, quality, and how much resources are required to achieve something. I think if you get to the kind of the senior level and you don't have some level of business acumen, it is going to definitely hold you back. Eventually, you're going to be speaking with business stakeholders that are going to want to talk business with you, and just talking tech is not going to pass muster. I'm also looking, whenever I hire someone that's at the more senior level, I'm looking that they're coachable and they're investment worthy, so that they're going to want to take on the lessons, they're going to want to take on additional responsibilities, that you can see that over time you could grow them to have a team be led by them rather than them just being a senior member on the team. And I think at this stage, this is where you can actually be quite bold in your salary ask, because I think if you've invested and you've proven all of these things, then you become quite a hot commodity. And I think this is the right time where you can actually say really what you want and really go for it. And that's pretty much it. Willing to connect with anyone, happy to chat more about any of this stuff. This is the stuff that I really enjoy, and I do quite a lot of advisory work in this space. So yeah, thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.